Years ago, I served a church in Salina, Kansas, which is right smack dab in the middle of Kansas, what one of my friends called the deep Midwest. And if you went west on I-70, you would end up in Colorado. And there was a family in the church that one year offered us the use of their condo in Breckenridge, Colorado, to take our family on vacation with the two small boys. And so we went to Breckenridge, and I was immediately hooked. I loved hiking the trails and taking the boys up in the mountain where we could visit old mine works and cabins that were slowly disintegrating into the hillside. And I especially loved, and I still love, hiking up and down the tree, hiking all the way up beyond the tree line, up beyond where there's even a bush, to one of those beautiful mountain lakes that are all dotted around Breckenridge in the area. It was breathtaking in more ways than one. There was the purity, the silence, the sheer aching beauty of the mountainside, the little rills that were running down the side and the rivers that went crashing down the slopes, the mountain flowers, particularly early in the summer, that crowded the meadows with color. And the sky. Once you got all the way up there, the sky seemed as if it was closer than it had ever been before, and you had never seen a blue like that before. It's not surprising that revelations of God consistently take place in mountains. Abraham on Mount Moriah hears the voice of God. Moses receives the Ten Commandments. The children of Israel hear the voice of God at Mount Sinai. Elijah, as we heard a few weeks ago, in the still small voice, heard God on Mount Horeb, which is another name for Mount Sinai. And here we have Jesus and his disciples meeting Elijah and Moses, but more than that, meeting and hearing from God himself. And like Moses, Jesus is glowing with the very glory of God, the very light of God, a light that had terrified the Israelites on the mountain and reduced Peter to gibbering nonsense when he saw that light in Jesus. This light, this brilliance, was the very glory of God. Now, some commentators have argued that perhaps this is us being able to see Jesus as he was with God before time immemorial, to see him as he really is, and maybe that's right. Maybe we're getting a peek beyond the door, the curtain is being drawn back, and we can see something we normally can't see. Perhaps that's true enough, but I think there's more going on. Genesis tells us that God created human beings in God's likeness and image. Now, the debates about what this means have been long and even fierce at times. But there's something godlike about us, according to this. To see a human being is, in some sense, to see the face of God. The psalmist in Psalm 8 struggles with this, with the apparent contradiction that you find here. It's as if the psalmist has hiked with us up to the very top of the mountain and been amazed by the beauty of the mountains, but by our own puniness and vulnerability. When you hike sometimes in the mountains in Colorado, they have a sign that warns you about hiking up there, and it says the mountain doesn't care. And it doesn't. And so here you have the psalmist in Psalm 8, aware of his own weakness and puniness, and he says, "When I consider your heavens, the works of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what are mere mortals that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them?" We've all had that experience, I expect. Staring at a mountain, standing at the seashore, the vast ocean in front of you, standing in the midst of a raging storm, and being struck by your own weakness and vulnerability, your own insignificance. And yet the psalmist marvels, "You have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You've made them rulers over the works of your hands. You've put everything under their feet." This puny, insignificant creation of yours shares in your glory and honor. Did you hear that word again? Glory. Crowned with glory and honor. In Hebrew, the word for glory means weighty or heavy or important. It's more than a glowing light. It speaks of the significance, the importance, even the power of that thing that it's referred to. The glory speaks to the profound importance of the one who bears it. So the glory that shines in the face of Moses and the glory that shines in the face of Jesus is the glory of God. And that same glory participates in our humanity because we are created in the image of God as well. It is our glory as well. We are, every one of us, every human being upon earth, bearers of the very glory of God. When you look beyond the curtain, when you look around the doorpost, when you look into your own souls, you see the glory of God shining. Well, so what? Maybe that's nice to know, but what difference does it make? We are in Epiphany, of course, the last week in Epiphany, and we've been exploring all of this time how Jesus made himself known, how he manifested himself. That's what the word Epiphany means. Jesus is revealing himself to his disciples and to us, but I would also argue that he's revealing us to ourselves. He is trying to show us that it's not just his glory, but it's our glory as well. On June 8, 1941, at an Anglican church in Oxford, C.S. Lewis, who would become famous for books like Mere Christianity, The Problem of Pain, the Narnia series, preached a sermon entitled The Weight of Glory. Near the end of the sermon, he asked similar questions to what I have asked. What does this glory of being a human being, entail? What does it mean? How useful is it, or even practical to know this? Lewis suggests the load, the weight, the burden of my neighbor's glory should be laid on my back, a load so heavy that only humility can carry it, and the backs of the proud will be broken. If we believe that all of us, everyone we know and everyone we encounter is created in the image of God, bears the very glory of God, is even a little less than God, we bear a terrible and wonderful responsibility to see in the grimmest, angriest, most unsympathetic face we know, the very face of God. And that's a very heavy burden indeed, a burden to break the backs of the proud. Lewis continues, it's a very serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses. To remember that the dullest and most uninteresting person you talk to may one day be a being, a creature which if you saw it now you would be strongly tempted to worship. That people we don't like, that people we disagree with, even people we would do better to stay away from, are glowing with the very glory of God is tough to take. The common assumption Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount is that we're to love our neighbors and hate our enemies, and of course he turned that on its head. But we humans, even we Christians, have been every bit as eager to segregate, demonize, and make clear who is in and who is out, who is worthy and who is unworthy as anyone else. But still, even the least, the lost, and the losers, at least to us, bear the very glory of God. And when you look behind the curtain, you see the face of Jesus. To return to Lewis, there are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, art, civilization, those are mortal, and their life is to ours like the life of a gnat. But it is immortals we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Next to the Holy Sacrament itself, he continues, your neighbor is the holiest object presented to your senses. And if he is your Christian neighbor, he concludes, he is holy in almost the same way, for in him Christ is truly hidden. Look around you. You're seeing the glory of God represented in the faces of your brothers and sisters, your divine siblings. When you look around, you see no ordinary person. You see someone who bears the very image of God. And together, collectively, we share this glory, and we gather together to send this glory into society, into a world that is doing its best to obscure this glory. When we see this glory in each other, perhaps we can begin to see it everywhere, to pull back the curtain everywhere. And perhaps glory in concentration is what we're aiming for. As Jesus said, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. Maybe that's one of the reasons we come together to worship, to bring all of the glory of God that is in each of our faces together. In another of his books, The Great Divorce, Lewis provides a provocative image of heaven and hell. The premise of the book is that the people in hell are offered a bus trip up to heaven, and if they want to, they can stay. But it would require them to grow in solidity and weight and glory, if you will, to journey with others toward God and wholeness. And very few of them choose to do so. In hell, Lewis has people living not far away from God, but further and further from each other, until eventually they're isolated on their own. Whereas in Lewis's idea of heaven, you journey deeper into God, and as you do, you become more solid and you acquire more companions. In Lewis's hell, you become increasingly isolated and alone and faded. In other words, you refuse the weight of glory. Today, right now, our world, our country needs people who, following Jesus, see the glory of God in the faces of the least glorious, the least admirable, the least attractive. We need people who refuse to let themselves be distracted by all the noise, people who refuse to scorn and scapegoat, people who, bearing the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ, see it in others as well. I want to be one of those people. And yet I know how hard it is. But I hope you want to be one of those people too. To see the glory of God in every single human being that God has created, however much they irritate you. Because that glory is there. And I think it's the only way we're going to make any difference in the world. To recognize the glory of God in us, to recognize the glory of God in others, and to communicate that glory through our love and our care. That's the only way we'll make a difference in our fractious, violent, divided world. It's the only way we will build for the kingdom. I see the glory in you this morning. I hope occasionally you'll get a glimpse of glory in me and Father Jay and others here. Because it's there. The very presence of God and the holy. Not because we are anything special, but because we all bear the glory of God in Jesus Christ. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.